Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to give not you guys, you're already here, but give the people who are still wanting to join us just another minute or so before we kick off our first webinar Wednesday of 2026, which makes me want to tell you Happy New Year. Feels maybe like it didn't start just a week ago and that maybe we're in dog years on this new year already, but nonetheless, we're 1 week in and so far so. So I'm really happy that you are all here. Hope to have these opportunities to provide you with meaningful, actionable things that can help you in your roles at your counties. So a few of the things that we've had in mind at CCI are providing these webinar Wednesdays or opportunities for you to have sort of a low barrier to getting more information, asking experts questions, and really being able to network with each other and with the folks that we bring in to provide their expertise. I'm really excited for our first webinar Wednesday of this year, where we're going to talk about grant writing. I think that it probably is safe to say that we all are looking for those big pots of money in various places and hopeful that one of these days we might find one. And one of the ways that we can do that and really augment some of our revenue streams is looking at how we might be positioning ourselves in the best way to receive grants. And so I'm really excited to have Alima Kane here. She is with the Colorado Natural Disaster Mitigation Enterprise, but more than that, she really is an expert in grant writing and has over 20 years of experience, not only in grant writing, but grant management, community engagement. She's worked for the state, she's worked for nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, and really has a lot of expertise in grant writing. So while we might talk specifically about some of the programs that she's managing and looking at, we're really hoping that these are transferable skills for you and that after you participate in and learn from this webinar, you will be able to understand when a funding opportunity might fit what you are looking for. Hopefully you are able to respond in a timely way in a good format for the grant reviewers. And really then ultimately, what can we all do collectively to improve our grant writing capabilities so that we find more success in those grants? So those are the things that we're hoping to provide for you today. I'm excited that Alima is here. I'll help moderate questions if you all have them at once. But again, I'm pleased that Alima is here and thank you all for being here. Alima, I'm going to turn it over to you and thanks again.
Great. Thank you all for coming and thank you for the lovely introduction. That was very generous. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, I'm mostly going to focus on grant writing. I'm not going to talk about the Natural Disaster Mitigation Enterprise too much, but you'll have my email address if you have any questions about that enterprise and the types of grants we offer. They're small-ish grants. They're typically capped at $750,000 for a 3-year period of performance for natural disaster mitigation projects. That's all I'm going to say about that for now. Let me go to the next slide. So today, as Kelly mentioned, we're just going to talk about how to pick a good grant opportunity and how to write a grant that aligns with what the funders are looking for. How do you write a grant that's an easy yes? That's always how I try to think about it. So I'm going to jump right into talking a little bit about what funders want. Having been on that funder side of things for a few different organizations, there's some things that are applicable across the board. All funders have goals that they are given by their leadership, by their board, by what their organization goals are, whatever it is. They have specific goals for specific grant programs. And to meet those goals, they're going to put a bunch of restrictions and requirements in their funding announcement to tell you what they're looking for and what they're not looking for. And then they're going to get all those grant applications, review them, score them, fund the ones they think meet those goals the best. And then they need to show whoever gave them that money that the funding is doing what it's meant to do. So that's kind of giving you the like both ends of the spectrum of why funders are being restrictive and have these specific requirements. They're learning over time what meets their goals and what doesn't, and they're trying to put in their applications the rules and restrictions that are going to get you closest to what they want to see. Um, the important thing there is that if you have a specific project in mind, finding the best funder is half the battle. Trying to fit a square peg in a round hole is going to be painful for everybody. So there's work to be done kind of on both sides. The other thing to keep in mind is that funders get at least double, if not quadruple or even more amount of applications than they have money to fund. So that's why making your grant the easy yes is so important, and not trying to pick a funder that just isn't aligning with your project goals. So you're wasting your time, you're wasting their time. It's very frustrating. So doing that extra work of finding out which funding opportunity is best is going to be really helpful. So to kind of get closer to what that looks like, you really want to consider how would your project align and help that funder meet that goal that they have, and is it worth the effort? Sometimes funders, you have this small, quick, straightforward project, and funders have so many restrictions on the way you can spend their funds or the type of reporting that they require that it may not be worth it to get that money for the type of work you're thinking of. There may be another funder that is a little less restrictive, perhaps. So really trying to find the right fit is helpful, and thinking through those elements of, is your project helping to meet the funder meet their goal? Can you manage all of the restrictions they may or may not have on the funds? And are any of those restrictions or requirements something that don't align with your organizational goals or rules or regulations? That's the piece that we tend to not think about too much. And having given out some grants, and then people get the grant agreement, they're like, oh no, we can't do that. That there's no way my board will approve that. So thinking then it's like extra heartbreaking, right? Because you already wrote a great grant, you got the money, but now you can't use it. So keep those elements in mind too. The other thing to think about is the funding amount and timeline. Sometimes it takes a funder a year to give you the funds, and you need to do the work quicker. Sometimes the funds come right away, and you need a little more time to get ready for it. And so, really understanding what the funder timeline is and your timeline can be is helpful. And then thinking about, are they offering enough funds? And if not, what is your strategy to find other funds to meet your true need? And then what happens if you've sort of put together different elements of funding and one falls through? How do you overcome that? So really thinking through your projects in ways that you can piece them apart. And if something fails, it doesn't, like, not everything blows up with it. You can still make progress while you're trying to find funding for whatever piece maybe fell apart. And then through all that, again, is the timing of the project aligning with the way you're getting funding? So it's a lot to think about. That's a lot of strategy, but being very strategic about the work you want to accomplish, how it can be split up, and who can fund it can really help you to find some flexibility in the way that you fund things. So the next step, this is all probably stuff you already know, and maybe that other stuff was too, but I cannot stress enough the importance of reading the entire funding announcement or notice of funding or opportunity, whatever they call it. Read the whole thing. Sometimes it is painful. They are very long and boring, but there are elements sprinkled throughout there, especially when we're talking about some of our more historic federal funders. They just update one paragraph in the 100-page document, and that one update could be critical. So it is worth it to read the whole thing, even if you've applied for the funding in the past, especially now with our federal funders. There's a lot of changes happening. Read everything and make sure that even if you've had that funding prior, the way it's being offered now works for your needs. It can also really, if you put on a little different lens and think about reading between the lines and what are they really looking for? Are there some review criteria that can help you hone in on, they talk a lot about this in the funding announcement, but when I look at the scoring, they're giving the most points to this other thing. Those kinds of things, unfortunately, don't always align. The person who writes the funding opportunity may not also write the scoring criteria, and there may be a little misalignment. So really thinking through what all of the documents are saying and telling you to do can be helpful. And then again, paying attention to those restrictions and requirements, um, those can get you if you haven't read through those a little bit and asked the right questions. So once you've kind of wrapped your head around your strategy and what the funder's looking for, give the funder what they're asking for. If they use a specific type of language and you use a different word, use their word. You're looking for the easy yes. Don't make them guess at what you mean when you mean exactly what they said. Just use their language. It may feel awkward to you, but it is going to make the reviewers so much happier because they don't have to guess like, oh, well, I think they mean what I mean when I say, X. You've just said it in the way they are used to hearing it. And know that it's your job to make your project fit their needs, not the other way around. I have a lot of grants applications that have a very high expectation of the work that our reviewers will do on our end to make everything match up. And they have too many applications to do a lot of that work. So just know it's your job to translate everything into what the funder is looking for. You're also going to want to make it easy for them to give you money, right? Um, they want the easy option. They want to know that when they give you money, you're going to be able to use it for the purpose that they have given it to you for. They want to know that you're going to be able to follow their reporting requirements. They're going to want to know that you understand if it's a reimbursement grant, how to do that. So sprinkle throughout your application pieces of information that show them that you're going to be an easy grantee to work with. Talking about the skill sets that your staff have, or the ability of your county to meet certain criteria that they list in terms of like planning, maybe, or the documents that they might ask for. They may not ask those questions specifically in the grant application, but if you can sprinkle that in, again, you're giving them this idea of like, this one's going to be easy. Everybody wants to say yes to the easy one. And then also, don't assume your funder understands your situation or why you need the funding. I see this a lot in grants where there's a big incident that happened in your local community that made the news that you think everybody knows about, but the funder is using a grant reviewer that is maybe new to the state or the area, maybe is adding some expertise that doesn't align with the main part of the grant, right? They're an expert in one little piece. They may not know your story. So being able to really assume you're talking to somebody who knows nothing about your organization, but specifically and concisely explaining what that backstory is can be incredibly helpful. It can also help to mitigate assumptions reviewers may have just by the way they interpreted the event. Um, what happens at your local county level and the way that your county experiences something or maybe is trying to tackle something can sometimes be communicated in ways that allow others to have assumptions that may or may not be correct. So if you tell your story from your perspective in the way that you believe it to be honestly impacting you, you get rid of those assumptions and you get to be the driver of your own narrative. And I think that can be really helpful and important. So I think, oh no, I got one more slide. In order to kind of really put all that into practice, there's some practical tips that you can do by researching the funder and what they funded before. This will give you they may say that they fund project blah, 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 and then you look and the words they're using doesn't quite align with the way you would interpret the types of projects they fund. So looking at real world examples can be really helpful. And it can help you to see the scope and scale of things that have scored well. So maybe your project is very similar, but it's much smaller. And you notice that while they say they fund small projects, there's no evidence of that. Can you beef your project up and make it more in line with what they typically fund? I always say the proof is in the money. So on both sides. So look at what they're putting their money towards. That's going to tell you where they really have their intents. And then if you see somebody who's been funded in the past and you know them, ask them, how was this funder to work with? What are they really looking for? As you've worked with them, what was hard and easy? And do you have any tips for me for my application? That can be so much information that you can't find anywhere else. So the network that you're in right now is a very helpful place to start, and anywhere else you might be making connections. Okay, I'm going to stop there. We're going to have a little activity where you're going to actually be the reviewer for a grant application very briefly to kind of put you in the mindset of having to look at something somebody else has written and how would you score it. This can be a very helpful tool for when you're writing your grant to like kind of flip your perspective a little bit. But before I get into that activity, I wanted to see if there's any questions. You can come off mute or type in the chat or raise your hand or whatever works for you.
Don't be shy, guys.
All right, I'm going to forge ahead. There will be time for more questions at the end. I have put a link in the chat to this next document that I'm going to flip over to, so you can download it and look at it on your own screen if you want. But let me just go back and do this. Okay. So here's the handout that I linked to in the chat. So it'll be on the screen and I will give you time to read it. Basically, what we're going to do is we are going to be the reviewer. And so the grant question is highlighted in blue on your screen, and it is to briefly describe your project and outcomes the funding will help you achieve. Describe your unmet need that the project addresses, the long-term benefit of the project, and why this funding mechanism is the most appropriate funding for your project. And after I go through all of this bit, I'll show you the 3 examples of what you're going to score. So just know this is the question they're meant to answer. The scoring criteria are below. You'll have between 0 and 3 points to score each of the 3 answers that we'll get to in a minute. A top score of 3 means that they very clearly described what their unmet need is, how the project addresses it, and the long-term benefits of the project. They've clearly identified other potential funders and described why those funders aren't appropriate, and they describe why the project can't be completed within their normal organizational budget. So that's what the reviewers are like, yes, this is what we want to fund. Top marks. And then the next one down is they do describe the unmet need. The project does address it and has some long-term benefits. They kind of identified some other potential funders and describe why those funders aren't appropriate. They didn't really do a very good job about why they can't just pay for this themselves or through these other funders. And then as we continue down, the application really doesn't define the unmet need very well. It vaguely identifies some other funders and it doesn't really seem like they've really thought through why this funding mechanism is the best one. And then a 0 is basically like they didn't even try. We don't know what they're asking for. It doesn't seem to have a lot of benefit, and we have no idea why they need our money. So 3 to 0 points. These are the 3 options. I'll scroll down here in a little bit to make sure it all fits on your screen. But again, the handout's linked in the chat. So this might be where you want to download that and read it yourself. Actually, I can just make it a little smaller, which probably isn't very helpful, but they're all on one page. So there's 3 different responses. These are highly edited responses that we've actually seen in our grant applications before, and they kind of mix and match a couple of responses. So these aren't like exactly what somebody said, but it gives you an idea of 3 different types of responses. And I'm going to stop talking for the next a good 5 minutes, and then I'll chime in and see if you've all had a chance to score it and are ready to have a little more discussion. I had a little notification to share the Google document. If you could go into the chat and download the grant writing seminar handout document that's in the chat, that would be the easiest way to get it. And if you can't get it, let me know. We'll work on it. I got a thumbs up. Thanks.
This is the awkward time where you wait to see if you passed your test or not. So I'm pretty eager to see how you guys did and how I also did.
All right. Well, does anybody need more time? If you could raise a hand or come off mute or type in the chat. Okay, I'm not hearing that we need more time, so I'm going to go back over to my slides. But if you need more time, we can make that happen. Um, so this is a time when we all get to come off mute, or you can type in the chat, and I can read your responses out loud. And we're just going to talk about how that went. So what stood out to you as you were scoring those responses? How do you feel about what just happened?
I think one was a little more like put together, cut dry, basically to the point of everything. They gave the other companies why they wouldn't be as good of a fit as the other one. So that one I liked a lot. I would have scored that one as like the three. I've never done grant writing before, so I'm sitting in on the meeting. I'm just hired with the Prowers Transit, so I'm interested in learning a lot about it. But at the same time, I really don't know what I'm doing, so to speak. So with the grants, but reading it, I mean, the first one had like everything you would need in it, and it was pretty brief.
Great. Anybody else? And I will say that I've been writing grants for a long time, and I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing all the time. So it's a learning process for sure. Anybody else? I got Let's see, the first one was scored as a 2 because it didn't explain the other funding sources as clearly as the third one. Yep. I think sometimes, as clear as you try to be in your scoring criteria, it's impossible to really nail it every time. So you get discrepancies between reviewers. Kieran had a 2, a 1, and a 3 in terms of the responses. Anything else that's standing out to you in terms of just the experience of being on the other side of it? Do you have any advice you'd give to respondents, the people that were writing? Amy, go.
Commissioner Mitchell, yeah, go ahead.
And it looks like my camera's not working.
Or
Oh,
it's snowy where you are, maybe.
yeah, no, it's not, but tomorrow it's coming.
Okay.
So sorry you don't see me. I'm on my screen and not my computer. I agree with Kieran. So Kieran, we're like-minded there. 2, 1, 3. But I never really, and I've written several grants and have actually been awarded a big one. Well, 850,000 is big for Park County. Never thought about the scoring part of it and looking at scoring and scoring my grant writing before I sent it in. So that is very helpful and will help on the community project funding that I'm going to be working on soon, I hope. So thank you very much.
Great. And I got another comment that being more clear and concise when answering questions is a goal, which I think is always great. That is the hardest part of grant writing, is being really clear and concise. I think I would encourage everybody, whoever wants to write a grant, to also become a grant reviewer. It will completely open your eyes to so many different ways of writing grants, and then also help you to understand when you have the best idea why it isn't funded, because it didn't do those other things by aligning with the funder, or maybe it wasn't as concise enough, or maybe somebody didn't have enough background, whatever the case may be. So I'm glad this little exercise was helpful. And to your point, Amy, absolutely score your own grants. If you wouldn't give it a high score, it's hard to imagine a reviewer would. So what can we do to improve on that? There's always somebody who can help you to have new ideas, have other people score your grant. Kieran said his takeaway is how important it is to put yourself in the reviewer's shoes. Response 2 is really detailed, but it doesn't really answer the question why the funding source is best, which is great, right? It's in the scoring, sometimes you get some of the unspoken important pieces that aren't in the grant application documents anywhere else. And not every reviewer or not every grantor provides the scoring, but if it's ever anywhere out there, check it out. Kirk, how would I score these responses? I don't ever score the grants that I work on. Our board does, but they scored similarly to this 2 for the first one. They scored the first one in the middle, the second response lowest, and the last response highest for the actual rough estimate of what those responses were for our board that scored them. So you guys are all in the right ballpark. Let's see. Sandy says she's been a reviewer, and concisely answering actual questions is key. Wordiness can lose the message. Absolutely. Beautiful prose can be beautiful prose, but if I don't know what you're talking about, that's not helping anybody out. So really honing in that writing can help.
Well, I might add from a reviewer perspective, the prose is lovely, except you're not reviewing only one application. And so then it's like, man, I spent forever reading that one. I don't know that I know what it says. And then the next one is like a couple bullet points. You're like, man, nailed it. So I think it's also important to remember how many applications reviewers are looking at, because it's not just yours.
That's a great point. It is usually at least in most of my review situations, it's 20 to 50. It's a lot. All right, I'm going to change gears a little bit here and maybe do a little group education with each other. and talk about what are some of the biggest challenges you faced in grant writing, and maybe we can help problem solve a little bit. And on the flip side of that, do you have any tips to share with the group about grant writing and networking and kind of growing all of our experience together? Any thoughts on those? All right, I'm not hearing a lot, and I know we're a little bit over time. So I put my email address in the chat. It's also on the screen, and our website is there as well. But just email me if you have questions. And thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time. I'm happy to help. I can stay on if anybody wants to chat or send me emails. Happy to help.
Thank you, Lima,
Thank
and
you.
thank you, commissioners and staff, for joining us. We really do hope these are actionable things that you can take back into your community. We'll keep these coming. I think our next one is later on this month, and we'll talk about, I think, some tax trends. So I'm hoping that this kind of catalog of things that we'll do throughout the year will provide you with real great tools. Lima, thank you for being here. Thank you for putting your email in and being willing to answer questions. And Tanya, I also really appreciate that you are here and you said, you don't know, but you did know. You knew more than you thought. And so the more that we can do this together, I think the better we all are. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lima. Thanks, Kieran and Madison and the rest of you. Please have a great afternoon.
Thank you, you as well.
Bye.